Well, I'm the youngest of six kids. In my family, we like to do everything evenly. So the oldest two went to MSU, the middle two went to Western Michigan, and the youngest two went to U of M. So I followed the sibling that was immediately older than me. Um, and I had a lot of friends actually who were going to U of M. So it wasn't far from home, only like 45 minutes away from home. So it was like getting away from home, but not being too far. Could still go home if I wanted to. Do. It was a lot of fun being away from home for the first time and living in a dorm. And, it was, I had taken a lot of hard classes in high school, AP classes. But when I got to U of M, um, it was just, I guess it was different than I expected. I don't know. So I didn't do too well my first semester. But after that, I settled in and just loved it. The classes were, people say, isn't it hard being in a really big university? But I always say, the thing is, you can find ways to make it smaller by joining clubs and organizations and things. And so that's what I did. And just loved it. So
Yeah. Do you remember where you lived, your roommates?
yes, I lived in Cousins, and back then it was just really old and needed updating, and I've since been back and I know that it's been updated, so it looks great. But it was originally, I think, an old nursing dorm, and so it was like on one end of the hill, and I lived in a converted triple. And you would think that they would have taken the largest room on the floor and made it into a triple, but I think they took the smallest room on the floor and made it into a triple. um, but it was a lot of fun. I decided to room with one of my cousins, and then we roomed with a third person whom we didn't know. She was from Connecticut, and so we had a lot of fun. And yeah, I liked living in the dorm. We had the floor was co-ed by room, so every other room, male, female, and we did a lot of hanging out together and having fun.
Yeah. Did you meet a lot of different kinds of people?
We did, from all over. I mean, that was the really cool thing. You could meet somebody from your hometown, but there were a lot of other people that came from out of state and even from out of the country. So I thought that I came from a pretty diverse background, but really it wasn't until I got to U of M that I understood what diversity really was. There were so many different kinds of people with all different interests, different backgrounds, from different countries, different states, different interests. I did not have the slightest idea. Um, and really, I think it was probably sometime even in my sophomore year, maybe, when, I was taking classes, and I was raised thinking really that you had to major in, well, either you were going to be a doctor or you were going to be a lawyer, pretty much. I mean, that was sort of how I was raised. And so I remember I signed up for, in my freshman year, I signed up for, math classes and science classes. And after a while, I was like, okay, I don't really think this is what I want to do. I started dabbling in psychology class.
Saying you dabbled in psychology a little bit.
And I found that I really liked the psychology classes because it was something applicable to life immediately when I walked out of the classroom. I couldn't really see myself using calculus, just walking around the campus. But psychology, that was something I could really get into, with every relationship. So that was of interest to me. So I remember when I told my parents, well, in particular, when I told my dad that I was going to major in psychology, and he was like, oh, so you're gonna go on to what? Like, medical school after that, or, like law school after that? I was like, yeah, I don't know. So, and also women's studies. I mean, again, it was something that was a little bit of psychology, sociology, anthropology, sort of all mixed together. And again, something that was directly applicable to life. So anyway, I went on and majored in those two things and loved it.
Oh, do you have a favorite professor or like one influential class that you took that just?
The person, well, there were a few, but one person who was both a psychology and a women's studies professor was Abby Stewart, and she was, I think, probably the most influential. I also loved like other classes that I liked. Like I liked my abnormal psych class, you know, and just really any of the psych and sociology classes that I took, I liked. I did not have a job, but I was through women's studies. I worked with with the law school. Actually, that's funny. They had a domestic violence project, and so I went over there and worked with. There was an attorney and then some law school students that worked with women who were victims of domestic violence and helped them to get restraining orders and so forth. And so I helped with sort of the intake questionnaires for women who were calling for help. And I also would go down to the courthouse and file some of the paperwork. So that was one of the projects that I worked on that took a long time, and I loved that.
Yeah.
I also was involved with a student organization, it was called AAA, Asian American Association. And I joined a sorority. I was a member of Gamma Phi Beta and the Greek system, which, you know, people are like, okay, that's just a bunch of, you know, partiers, right? I mean, that's what really the Greek system's about, right? And I said, no, actually. We did a lot of community service work. We raised money for girls to be able to go to camp. It was also, you know, you could find study groups in your sorority and just really learn about building relationships. I remember one of our sorority sisters had a learning disability. She was dyslexic, and she needed help. The sisters would take turns reading to her textbook. So you just had to sign up for like 30 minutes or whatever you could spare and just go and read her textbook to her, which saved her like hours of having to struggle through figuring out what her textbook said. They didn't have many textbooks that were recorded then for some reason, but I think now they probably do. But at that time, you know, it was really, she just relied on people to come and volunteer to read to help her. So we would do things like that. I mean, so learned a lot of other life lessons, I guess, not just partying. What was really big when I was there and what I participated in was the Take Back the Night rallies, which were, unfortunately, there were some incidents on campus where women were not necessarily safe walking around, and I know that, I mean, that continues to be the case, not just in Ann Arbor, but everywhere. And so there were rallies that were, you know, about women having a right to feel safe, you know, whatever time they're walking around, however they're dressed, whatever, like, it's not a reason that they should not feel safe. And so, yeah, I participated in some of those rallies. A little bit. I mean, when I came home, we would have family gatherings at my relative's restaurant. You know, by that time, my grandmother had passed away, but my uncle and his cousin were then running the restaurant. Originally, it was my grandmother, my grandfather, and my grandmother's brother who were running the restaurant, and then they passed it on to the next generation. But when we would come home for like Thanksgiving, we would have our Thanksgiving meal. Our extended family would get together at the restaurant and things. So I've got great memories from my childhood, and then as I got older, of, you know, just going to the restaurant and having family meals there.
Yeah,
and going to baseball games and things with when I was growing up, right? My dad would always take us to Tiger games at Tiger Stadium before Comerica Park. And then sometimes after the game, we would go for Lafayette, Coney Island. And yeah, loved that. We used to go. I used to go to Boblo, pick up the Boblo boat, and sometimes we would do it, from Detroit. But that was a longer ride, so sometimes we would drive part way and meet the boat somewhere closer to Boblo. But Belle Isle, we would go to Belle Isle. And I always liked hearing the stories that my mom would tell about what the city was like when she was growing up. That she would take the trolley and she would ride her bike or whatever around town and meet her friends at the Kearns Clock and go to Belle Isle and hang out by the Scott Fountain, and how everybody used to take their wedding pictures at Scott Fountain on Belle Isle. And what else? Going to Verner's and also Sanders, and having hot fudge, cream puffs, things like that. But so always hearing just great stories about what the city was like. I think there was a shoe store. I want to say it was called Fife's, from what I hear. That it was like 5 stories of just shoes. And they would wrap them like in brown paper, like it was a present. So when you bought shoes, they would wrap up your box like it was a present and give it to you. But just about what great customer service there always was in all of the stores. Oh, another childhood memory was going down to Hudson's, the old Hudson's in Detroit, when it was there. Of course, now it's not there. Part of it is the end of Ford Field. But I remember there were people on the elevators, they had white gloves on, and they would dial up whatever floor you wanted to go to. And every year during the holidays, they set up this little store for kids. Little store. It was really like, I guess, what I'm thinking is, it was just one room. And the kids, you could go in there, and so you had your money, whatever, $20 bill, whatever it was. And you would buy things for your parents for the holidays. So that, your parents wouldn't know what you chose for them. And it was always stuff like, a shoehorn or soap on a rope or, that kind of stuff. But that was really cool because you felt so special because you were going in there and doing the shopping yourself at Hudson's, which was a big deal. So. Yes, it's so exciting to see the changes that are happening right now. I mean, it took a long time for the city. This is what I say to people. It took a long time for the city to get to decline and to become in a not so great state of affairs. And I mean, there's a lot of things you can point to, whether it's corrupt government, politicians that were stealing, whatever. There's a lot of stuff you can point to, but it's going to take a lot to make it come back, but it's so exciting to see the progress now. I say over the years, there have been people that have tried to make a go of little individual businesses. So every now and then a great restaurant would pop up somewhere and people would go to it for a while, but after a while it was like that place would close because there wasn't like the critical mass of people going, because it was just one restaurant in the middle of somewhere, in the middle of a bad neighborhood, Now there's some momentum, and there, with all that the Illiches and Dan Gilbert are doing to really create sort of a critical mass, a center where then things can start popping up around. So it's really exciting that people are moving into the city. It's great to see all these old buildings, because that was another thing, right? A lot of the really great architecture has been destroyed. Everything from, the train station, which people have gone in there and stripped it of everything. So that was really a sad thing to see. Or like Hudson's being torn down and, things like that. But now it's nice to see, even though it's, I'm sure, way more costly to rehab some of these places than it is just to start fresh. It's really nice to see that there are a lot of places that are being rehabbed, that are being refurbished, and are now lofts that people are moving into. And I've seen yoga studios in some old buildings, and CrossFit places, and bike places, and organized bike rides and things. You know, there's so much going on in the city. Every day I'm like amazed. There's a new restaurant opening, or there's a new something popping up. Like something. I don't even know all the different things, but it's exciting because there's so much to do. So I think that, we're on our way. Love for the university to have even more in the way of extension programs, because I know that there are people who love the city, who want to stay here, work here. They've got family, they've got deep roots here, and they would love to take, whether it's continuing ed or even undergrad classes or whatever. Going to Ann Arbor isn't for everyone. Or, I mean, even Flint or Dearborn, really. But it would be great for the university to have more in the way of classes. And I know there are, well, just to be part of the revitalization. So urban planning. I mean, I've got a friend who went to U of M in urban planning. So certainly there could be a lot of there's a lot of material down here, I guess. So nonprofit classes, stuff like that. I mean, I think that this would be a really rich environment for some of those kinds of classes. I would say take advantage of all the offerings that you can while you're there, because never again in your life will you, I mean, wait, I shouldn't really say it like that. Even as an alum, there are things that are available to you through the university, but just being a student, you just have the greatest opportunity to participate in various organizations, clubs, to learn, to be a sponge and learn so much. It was an exciting time for me. I loved being part of that, and I still love being part of it as an alum. I always look forward to getting my magazines and reading through them to see what the new thing is, what's happening, and the emails and things that I get that keep me updated. And of course, going back to Ann Arbor for football games. I highly recommend that. But my advice to students really is to literally soak up as much as you can while you're in school, and then when you graduate, just always remember the university, and that gave you the solid groundwork, and it's something that you have in common with so many people. That's the thing, right? Once you leave the university, in every city, everywhere that you go, there is always somebody that has something in common with you, and it's often the fact that they went to U of M also. So that, to me, is a really cool thing. I know people that have moved far away from home, and they didn't know a soul in whatever city they were in, and they looked up their local alumni club, and they went to some function, and that's how they first met, like the first person in that city. Their first friend was somebody that they met at an alumni function. So there's always that, that you can fall back on, or career, like if you're looking for a job, I know you can tap into the career center, and things like that. But and even just on your resume, like it means something when you have that you graduated from the University of Michigan on your resume. That automatically means something to somebody, whether they are an alum or not. It means a certain standard. You've achieved a certain standard. You graduated from the University of Michigan. So be proud, and good luck.